somehow we as human always looking for the short version of everything or for a shortcut. And we're always looking for loopholes, shortcuts, remedies, fast cures, and so forth. Now comes the big question, why? Why are you looking for the shortcuts? I mean, I'm sure you heard the famous cliche, the short way always ends up being the long way. But how come most of us always looking for, if it's not a shortcut, then a loophole? And if not a loophole, then a remedy or something. So the answer for that is because life is full of worries. And we're going from worry to worry to worry to worry. Therefore, we don't feel like dealing with the reality or the worries, and we're trying to find the loopholes, the quick solutions, the shortcuts. And as I said before, usually the short way ends up being the long way. So as our habit, I will start with a quick story to set the tone of the class. And then we're going to go to a very important question, a fascinating question that has been asked in many different ways. I know this class will change some people's lives. It changed mine when I prepared the class because I was in need of an answer, something to narrow down options, some guidance, and then when I was preparing the class, it hit the spot. So I know the class will change some people's lives, maybe the ones who are present, maybe the ones who are behind the screen, but it's a very important topic and a very good solution. So without further ado, the story goes as follows, that a few years ago, there was in America the completion of the Shas, Siyum Shas. Okay, every 7 years, thousands and thousands of men, they learn the Daf Yomi, the 1 page a day of the Talmud, and after 7 years, there's a Siyum, a big celebration. And a few years ago, it was in one of the big stadiums in New York. I don't remember the name, Mets, Yankees, one of these big stadiums. I think 90,000 people were there. So, and it was advertised on all sorts of media, and at the time there was a Jewish Orthodox newspaper that covered the event, and they publicized a letter that was sent to the system by a lady. And to make a very long story short, she wrote something along the line, next week when my husband is finishing, when the whole, when everybody will be finishing the Shas, me and my kids will be finishing it too. We'll be completing it too. Now, what was it about? Then she says that years prior to that, there was some type of issue in the house, that they were looking for some miraculous solution. And somehow the husband decided to take upon himself to learn to do the Daf Yomi, which came in the worst time of the day. It came in the evening when he had to leave the house, when she's putting the kids to sleep, when they wanted to have dinner. And she says it kind of took over our life. No vacations, because he can't miss a class. Every event we had to be late because we had to leave after the class. I mean, the whole life revolved around his class of the Daf Yomi. So finally, after 7 year cycle, he's finishing the Shas, we're finishing it too. Of course, she said it not in a negative way, in a positive way. So, I'm going to leave this story here, and we'll get back to the point as we go in the class. But when a person needs a very big miracle, he needs to do something big. You don't get a big miracle in your life for giving $18 the charity to your favorite organization. And I told you a few times, I threw it out there. I know a lot of people are asking me to elaborate on that more, but I told you here and there, don't worry, you'll get the full version soon, that 20 plus years ago, I sat in jail for a year and a half, facing 40 years in jail with a 47 count indictment in the federal system in New York. So I needed a big miracle. This wasn't like paying off something and getting out of it. And I shared the story a few times. It's not that it's a big secret. It's just not so public and not so advertised. But nevertheless, when I somehow miraculously got out of jail, which was a miracle to start with, then was required a greater miracle to get me out of this jam. So when a person needs a huge miracle, a huge action needs to be done. Something big needs to be done. And at the time, I shared in different occasions how at the time, that's when I met my first rabbi, who told me straight out, this is just a test from Hashem, and you need to lachzor b'tshuva, you need to do tshuva, but not like once a week. You need to do serious tshuva, Shabbat, Tefillin, Brit, everything, and don't worry. Yeah, don't worry. I have 40 years looking in jail. Don't worry. So for half a year, I was a Jew on steroids, waking up 4 o'clock in the morning and going to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning. I lived in New York at the same time. At that time, I would go every night to the Lubavitch Rebbe's grave and read a book of Tehillim in the freezing cold of New York in ice cold winter, reading a book of Tehillim, learning Torah all day long, dipping in a mikveh at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was the best Jew in history. Needless to say, that's when I became observant. And of course, the outcome was the miracle that I'm here and not sitting in jail yet. And some of the people who were in this whole story are still sitting in jail, by the way. The only 2 people who got out of this entire thing, we were arrested 127 people. 2 people got out of it, me and my famous friend from all my stories, Itzik. The only 2 people who made tshuva, real tshuva, got out of it. So, and it's a long story, and like I said, I shared it a few times. It's not so publicly online, but you can find it. But what am I saying is when you need a very big miracle, something big needs to be done. And when a person takes on himself a heavy weight, but he accepts on himself what's called a burden, and it requires from the person to change a lot, and it's not so simple. But in many situations, Hashem pushes you to that place. So that leads us to a very deep, fascinating, exciting question that we find in this week's parasha, Parashat Vayeche, of course, that it says 3 times in the Torah about our visit to Mitzrayim, to Egypt. And each time it says for how long we going to be there. Just that each time it says a different amount of time. So we find 3 times in the Torah the fact that we're going to be in exile in Mitzrayim, each time different amount of years. So what is the bottom line? How long we were in Mitzrayim? The Torah gives 3 different times. And all 3 didn't happen, by the way. You don't have to answer now. I'm just asking to present the situation. So if you remember, in the first encounter Avraham Avinu has with the Master of the universe, not his first encounter with God, but the first encounter that is discussed, the exile, it's called Brit Ben HaBetarim, when the Master of the universe talks to Avraham Avinu, tells him bring some animals, cut them in half. They cut a deal about many different things, and then the Master of the universe tells Avraham Avinu, Ger yeh zaracha be'eretz lo lahem, your kids are going to be exiled in a land that is not theirs for 400 years. So we get the first time in the Torah that we're getting the message that we're going to be in Mitzrayim for 400 years. Really? We weren't in Mitzrayim for 400 years. Somehow from 400 years it went down to 210 years. And most of the time of the 210 years that we were actually in Mitzrayim, it wasn't slavery. Most of the time was not slavery. Most of the time we were just there. So in one encounter, the Master of the universe tells Avraham Avinu, they're going to be 400 years in Mitzrayim. That never happened. It went down to 210. And even 210, it wasn't all slavery. And why is that important to know? Because God told Avraham, they'll be slaves. They're going to be working hard there. So that didn't happen. So somehow, the nation of Israel were able to change the decree. There's a clear prophecy in the Torah given by the creator of the world that we're going to be slaves for 400 years, and that didn't happen. What do you take from that? That we were able, our ancestors, were able to change the decree. Saying, in other words, that the Torah is teaching me that there's a way to reverse or to change or to affect a decree that comes upon me. So that's a loophole, right? We started the class by saying, I need a shortcut. I need a loophole. I need something to change the situation. Okay, so how do I do that? We're now in exile for quite a long time. How can we change that? If our ancestors did that over 3,000 years ago, why can't we do that? I'm talking about the general slavery, the general exile, and also my private situation. So just a little bit of background about the parasha. The parasha is called Vayeche. It starts with the words Vayeche Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim, and Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. Now, it's very interesting because when Yaakov came down to Mitzrayim, you know the whole story. We learned through it in the last few parashot. Yosef was in Mitzrayim. The brothers come to take food. You know the whole encounter. And then he tells them, come and move here. I'll pay for the relocation. I'll pay for everything. And bring my father too. When Yaakov comes down to Mitzrayim, they have a meeting with Paro, and Paro asks him, how old are you? So he tells them, I'm 130 years old. And Paro says in a blunt way, wow, you look much older than your age. Yaakov looked worn out, wrinkles, white hair. You know, he went through a lot, Yaakov, his entire life. Running away from Esav, being used by Lavan, being cheated by Lavan, the rape of Dinah, the disappearing of Yosef. So he obviously looked way older than he was. And Paro tells him, straight out, you don't look your age. You look like you lived 3 lifetimes. What does Yaakov answers him? He says, Me'at v'ra'im shenei chayai. Days of my life have been few and miserable. Now, we learn in the parasha that Yaakov comes to Mitzrayim for 17 years, and that was the best time of his life. So in Mitzrayim, that's when life becomes better. So there was a prophecy to Avraham Avinu that they're going to go to Mitzrayim and be slaves. And then Yaakov goes to Mitzrayim and life changes for the best. All his life, 130 years, were miserable. And when he goes to Mitzrayim, where he's there have to be miserable, then he lives the best years of his life. How come Mitzrayim turns to be good? Mitzrayim, you can look at it as the country and look at it as the situation of slavery. Now, you have to understand that the children, the children of Israel, the Bnei Israel, the nation of Israel, they go down to Mitzrayim after 200 years of living in Canaan, in Eretz Israel, when everything was good. In the beginning, everything was real good in Mitzrayim. Nothing was bad. So not only that they didn't go to exile, it was the complete opposite. It's kind of like the Jews are living now in North America. Los Angeles, Miami, beautiful homes, beautiful cars, money, vacations. That doesn't look so much like exile. In the last 7 years in North America, doesn't look like exile. It actually looks much better than what the Jews lived for hundreds of years. So 17 years, and by the way, I'm not limiting North America. It can be Australia, it can be Europe. I'm saying North America because it happens to be that the Jews in North America, which is the majority of our nation, they don't live so bad there. Maybe now it's getting a little bit worse, but for the last 67 years, doesn't look like exile. When I drive around in Beverly Hills and Boca Raton, doesn't look like exile. So, and chas v'shalom, not that I'm wishing to anybody to suffer. Very good, but still, we need to understand, if we're supposed to be in exile, that doesn't look like exile. And if Mitzrayim was supposed to be exile, Yaakov Avinu had a pretty good time, 17 years in Mitzrayim. He lived good. And it was supposed to be slavery, or what's called shiabud. Shiabud is hard work, and that didn't happen. So like I told you, if we go back a few parashot back, let's go back to Parashat Lech Lecha, the covenant of Avraham Avinu, Brit Ben HaBetarim. Hashem tells Avraham Avinu, your children are going to be 400 years in Mitzrayim, and they're going to be slaves there. And they're going to be gerim, they're going to be foreign there, and it's going to be pretty bad. That's the first time that the Torah is telling us that we're going to be 400 years in Mitzrayim. Let's put it aside because it never happened. Now let's go forward to Parashat Bo in the book of Shmot. Parashat Bo is summarizing a little bit of what was prior to the arrival of Mitzrayim. And if you want to be precise, go to the book of Shmot, chapter 12, verse 40. And it says there that, because Parashat Bo is summarizing what was in Mitzrayim, so it says that we were there 430 years. What? So, a few parashot before that in Lech Lecha, Hashem says we're going to be there 400 years. A few parashot before in Parashat Bo, the Torah says, no, we were there for 430 years. But practically, we weren't there for 430 years. So how come the Torah is telling us that we were there for 430 years? This is clear verses in the Torah. Now let's go back again. We're going a little bit backwards and forth to next week's parasha, Parashat Miketz. And then it says there something interesting. Yaakov Avinu has some type of a spirit of prophecy, and he prophesizes that we're going to be 210 years in Mitzrayim by telling the... I'm sorry, I said Miketz next week's parasha. I'm talking last week's parasha. Yaakov Avinu tells the brothers, Redu leMitzrayim lishvor shever. Go down to Mitzrayim to bring us food. Here is already a prophecy. Redu leMitzrayim, go down to Egypt. The word Redu, Reish Dalet Vav, is the numerical value of 210. Yaakov Avinu tells them in a hidden way, you're going to go down to Mitzrayim for 210 years. But that's the most precise amount of time that we were actually there. But going back to the prophecy, there wasn't any suffering 210 years. Really, the suffering was maybe 86 years. So from 400, it jumped to 430, from 430 down to 210, that we were actually in Mitzrayim, and from that, 86 years of actually suffering. So originally, it was prophesied by the creator of the world that the suffering will be 400 years. So somehow we went down to 210, and actual suffering, 86. Because really, the Torah says that the actual slavery only started when the last of all tribes died. Who's the last that died last? Who's the one? Was the Shevet Levi. And he died 94 years after he went down to Mitzrayim. So the slavery started 94 years after, when the last of all tribes died. So really, that leaves us with 116 years, right? From 210, remove the 94 years of Levi, so we're left with 116 years. So again, now it's reduced even more. But before, practically, actually what happened is 86 years. And how do we know it's 86 years? Because Miriam, when they left Mitzrayim, was 86. Moshe was 80, Aaron was 83, Miriam was 86. And Miriam was born right when the slavery started. That's one of the reasons why her name is Miriam. Miriam comes from the word in Hebrew, mar, bitterness. That's when the bitterness started. So we conclude that really the slavery was only 86 years from the 400 originally prophesied. Now we have a problem here. That in the Torah, everything is accurate, everything is precise. You cannot, any way you're going to look at it, you can't discount the Torah or prove it wrong. But that's not 100% solid, because there are some verses in the Torah that make the Torah not look so liable, not so reliable, and it makes the Torah look a little bit like, I found a mistake. Because many great rabbis in our generation and other generation, they come and they prove how the Torah is so accurate that it cannot be written by a human, it can only be divine. And there are numerous videos online that you can find so many different explanations how the Torah has to be divine. But nevertheless, there's a famous story, I'm sure you heard about it, with Talmayi HaMelech, the King Talmayi. He was around the time of the Second Temple, and he was a great king, a great scholar, a learned man, and he wanted to learn the Torah. And what did he do? He subpoenaed 70 of the elders of the nation of Israel, and he told them, I want you all to translate the Torah to Greek, so I can learn it. And he knew that, that's what, at least he was educated. He's like, don't really believe the Jews. They'll tell you what you want to hear, not really what it says. On that, there's a joke that one time a person wanted to disprove the Jews. So he stops a man on the street and tells him, Dear Jew, how many times a day do you pray? He says, 3 times a day. Okay, so he stops another Jew and he tells him, hey, you, Jew, how many times a day do you pray? He says, 4. Stops another person, are you Jewish? Yeah. How many times a day do you pray? 5. So he goes to the rabbi and tells him, I don't know, you Jews, what's going on with you? Each Jew gives me a completely different answer. One gave me 3 times a day, one gave me 4 times a day, one even gave me 5 times a day. So the rabbi laughed and told him, well, the first one that you met is a Jew that goes every day to the synagogue and he prays 3 times a day. That's the right answer. The second Jew that you met, it's what's called a Jew, a Shabbat Jew. He only goes to the synagogue on Shabbat, so he only knows 4 prayers. And the third Jew that you met, that's like a Jew that goes once a year to Shul on Yom Kippur, so he knows you pray 5 times a day. So all the answers are right, but each one tells you it in a different version. So Talmayi was taught that if you ask a Jew a question about the Torah, they'll tell you what you want to hear, not really what it says in the text. So what did he do? He took 70 of the elders of the nation of Israel and told them, I want you to translate the Torah to Greek, but since I don't want you to start manipulating what it says in the Torah, he separated them all, each one in a different room. It was a miracle that Hashem in His divine power made it that they all knew that He's looking for some type of error to disprove and discount the Torah. And there are psukim in the Torah that will kind of get us in trouble, that would look the Torah very not true. So Hashem made a miracle and all 70 men knew exactly these psukim that are going to put us in trouble, and all of them changed it in the exact same way. The first one, of course, is Bereshit bara Elokim. Now, in Hebrew, when you translate Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning, God created. But they were all afraid that he will understand it, that Bereshit is an entity, Bereshit bara Elokim. That Bereshit is the name of an entity, of a God, and he created Elokim. And they all changed it to Elokim bara Bereshit. So, and why am I telling you this story? Because in our psukim right now, that's where you find contradictions. Avraham Avinu hears 400 years. Parashat Bo, 430 years. Parashat Miketz, 210 years. What's going on here? Somebody messed up the version. Somebody miscalculated. So at the time with the King Talmayi, they all changed the verse. The verse says, Umoshav bnei Yisrael 400 shana. The nation of Israel sat in Egypt 400 years. They all added 2 words. Vebesh'ar ha'arasot. And also in other lands. That you can't limit it to the 430 years. Yeah, 430 years in Egypt and some other lands that they were traveling around. So forget about Talmayi right now, the king. You're looking at the verses, and you're saying, I don't understand what's going on here. We have 3 different verses from 3 different chapters telling us that we're going to be in Egypt. Each time is a whole different time. 400 years, 430 years, and 210 years. So what's going on here? One can interpret it that it was a mistake. There's some type of mistake in the text. Or, which is wrong, of course. Or to say, wait a minute. There was a decree, and somehow it was changed. from 400 years of slavery, it was changed, and practically we're only slaves for 86 years. How many years we were physically in Mitzrayim? 210. Must be that there's a way to change a decree. I'm already telling you, I'm jumping one step ahead. There's no way to change the decree, but there's ways to, so to say, manipulate it or redo it, or how did you say? Soften. Yeah, soften is a nice way. Change. We can use many different words. Yeah. And of course, that's what we want to understand. I mean, my life is full of worries. My life, your life, we're all going from worry to worry. One worries about his livelihood, his parnasah. Another person is worried about his kids, the health, the education of the kids, getting married. So, in order for us to continue and figure out what's going on and what the text is saying, then I'll start with a quick joke that there was once a man, he came to his office and he announced, guys, today I am married to my wife for 50 years. He brought wine, cakes, all sorts of treats, and everybody's celebrating, big balloons, 5-0, everybody's making a toast, and at some point one of the co-workers says, what are you talking about? 50 years? You and me married in the same month, and I'm only married 25 years. How are you married 50 years? So he says, the koshi hashiabud, the labor was so difficult and hard, it's like 50 years. so on that, there's another joke, that one time a couple were celebrating their gold anniversary, right? 50 years. So they gathered all the family and everybody's there celebrating. So the wife brought a big cake and she starts cutting the cake. And as she's cutting the cake, the man starts tearing. And she turns around, she's like, what? We're married 50 years? I didn't know you're that sensitive. I'm cutting a cake, you're tearing. He says, no, I'm not tearing because of that. She's like, okay, so why you have tears in your eyes? So he says, 50 years ago when I was dating with you, your father grabbed me and told me, either you're marrying my daughter or I'm going to throw you to jail for 50 years. So she says, so what did you do? He's like, well, of course I married you. So she says, so why are you crying? He says, because if I would take option number 2, today I would be released. So we see from the jokes and the reality that sometimes the severity of the punishment is so strong that it's like double or triple. Or in many cases, in jail, if you behave nice, they take off time. They said, you did your time, we'll remove time. On the same note, you can owe an institute money and start making payments, and at some point the institute says, okay, just give us 70% of the debt. But give it. We'd rather have 70% of the debt than nothing. So you see that in many cases, extreme measure will change the decree. So the Midrash actually says, yes, there were 210 years in Mitzrayim because it was intense 210 years. Therefore, it was like as if you were 400. The intensity of the slavery was so hard that it was reduced from 400 to 210 years. Okay. But now we're left with a number of 430, because in Parashat Bo it says that we were in Mitzrayim for 430 years. What does the Midrash answer on that? I didn't say you're going to be a slave for 430 years. From the day the decree was said till you left Mitzrayim was 430 years. So when we read in Parashat Bo that we were in Mitzrayim for 430 years, weren't physically, it was 430 years since Brit Ben HaBetarim, since when Hashem told us we're going to be in Mitzrayim, till we actually left. So it wasn't really, it was, not in theory, but it's almost like Chas v'shalom, if a person has to go through an operation, then when does he start worrying? Not from the day of the operation. Half a year before that, when the doctor tells him, in half a year we're going to have to do an operation. So he starts worrying from the day of the message, not from the actual operation. And that can be the same thing. A person can be sentenced to go to jail. When does he start being upset and worried? From the sentence, not from when he actually goes into jail. So really the 430 years that we find in Parashat Bo, that's from the day we were told we're going to Mitzrayim till the day we left Mitzrayim. That was a time on the timeline, 430 years. The 400 years that it says in the Torah, Rashi says, no. The 400 years is from the day Yitzchak was born till we left Mitzrayim. And why is that so sufficient and so important? Because Avraham Avinu was told, Ger yeh zaracha. Zaracha means your child, your offspring. Saying, since Yitzchak was born, that's when it starts. Because you're not going to go to Mitzrayim. Your child is going to go to Mitzrayim. Now, even Yitzchak physically didn't go, but that was the decree. So Rashi says, no, the 400 years started when Yitzchak was born, so you have to wait for Yaakov to be born, and then go to Mitzrayim after 130 years. That's where you get the 400 years. Because when it says Ger yeh zaracha, means your child, that's when it starts. Okay, so we solved the 430 and we solved the 400. But even the 210 years weren't slavery. Okay, so we figured out there were physically 210 years in Mitzrayim, but where, the prophecy was Vayavdum Vayanum. They will enslave them and oppress them. That was I can't say promise. That's what God told Abraham. That didn't happen for 210 years. We said that it was only 86 years. So what changed? What was reduced from 400 to 210, from 210 to 86? How can it be that from all this time that was supposed to be the slavery, you can take from that 17 years of Yaakov was good 70 years. I mean, the parasha says, Vayeche Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim. When Yaakov lived in Eretz Mitzrayim, that's when he lived the life. All the families around him, no worries, no problems. So he's supposed to go to Egypt to be a slave, and he lives in Beverly Hills. In this week's parasha, not in this week's, in last week's parasha, it says that Yosef had to kind of convince Yaakov to come down to Mitzrayim. First of all, it's a little bit not so clear how come Yosef is not running up to his father to tell him he's alive and tells him, I'm the second to the king, please come with me down to Mitzrayim. He sends messengers. I mean, you didn't see your father for 22 years. Go with your brothers. I'm sure you can get a visa to go out of Mitzrayim and to enter Israel. Why are you sending messengers? That in itself is not so clear. But nevertheless, Yosef had to, so to say, bribe or convince Yaakov to come down to Mitzrayim, because Yaakov didn't want to go down to Mitzrayim. So it says that Yosef sent Yaakov presents. Right? Remember, he gave everybody presents. He gave Binyamin a present. And then it says that he gave Yaakov a present. Now, how do you choose a present to your father after you didn't see him for 22 years? I'm sure you all run into this difficulty. I told you many times, comes the birthday of my father, I don't know what to buy him. I mean, what am I going to buy him? A tie? An aftershave? I mean, he has everything. Every time I have to be like, what am I going to buy now? And it's not only my father. Every person you want to buy something, what am I going to buy? The person has everything. So Yosef is going to shop for presents for his father after he didn't see him for 22 years. And what is he sending? What does he send him as a present? A bottle of old wine and grisim shel ful. You know what's grisim shel ful? Hummus. He sent him the food, how do you call it, that every country has their dish. The Italians have the pizza, and whatever, the Austrians, they have schnitzel. So the Egyptians have hummus. Egypt is not known to have such great wine, by the way. You're not going to find any wineries in Egypt. The wineries are in maybe Italy, in Southern California, here in the Golan. Egypt! He's sending wine from Egypt, and you think Yaakov is going to drink that wine? And then he's sending him a bag of hummus? Grisim shel ful is groats of board beans. So it's not even the actual hummus, it's grinded.
Grease is the size? Or
Yeah. The full, the hummus, it's like a type of a bean. Yeah. But the grisim shel full, it's when it's already grind. Okay. Now, comes here a very interesting situation. The Shvatim, the brothers of Yosef, come up to Yaakov, and they have to tell him, we found Yosef. What? Yosef is alive? Now, what's going to happen here right now? In the beginning, Yaakov will be very happy to hear that Yosef is alive, right? But what's going to be the next thing after that? He's going to look at the brothers. So you lied to me for 22 years? You knew? Every year I do a yahrzeit and I say Kaddish, and I was mourning the death of my child for 22 years, and all this time you knew? How do you come and break the news? How does the brothers now stand in front of Yaakov and they say, oh, by the way, we found him in Mitzrayim. Oh, we don't know how he got there. So we don't know how it's going to be. In the beginning, Yaakov would be very happy, and then right away he's going to be very sad by saying, I can't believe it. You fooled me for 22 years. So Yosef decides to send a very symbolic present that not only will soften the anger and sadness of Yaakov, but will also make him realize that he has to come down to Mitzrayim. Because Yaakov would not come down to Mitzrayim, not because he didn't like the land, because he knew the prophecy. And he did not want to be the one who starts the exile. Because he knew the second that I go down to Mitzrayim, that's it. The prophecy starts. So Yaakov's like, I'm not going to Mitzrayim. As long as I don't go to Mitzrayim, the prophecy should not or maybe won't happen. So Yaakov is now, doesn't want to go to Mitzrayim because he doesn't want to activate, so to say, the prophecy. More than that, how can he be convinced to go down? So Yosef is thinking in a very particular way. I need to find out a way how to bring Yaakov to Mitzrayim, and also that he's not going to be so angry about the whole situation. So Yaakov sends the old bottle of wine and the grisim shel ful, these groats of bored beans. Now, why is that important, that grisim? Because the bean is kind of, what would be the right word? Not dissected, rather it's crushed or separated. Ligros means to cut very fine. So it was cut very, very fine. And when do you get the benefit of that actual bean? Is only when you cut it. So Yosef is hinting to his father, the fact that I went down to Mitzrayim was for a benefit. Don't be upset at the brothers. Do not be upset at them when they tell you they found me. And do not be upset that you have to come down here, because it was all for a benefit. So the hint in the grisim shel ful, the groats of bored beans, is that there was a benefit for me coming down here. There was a decree to separate the family. The cutting, the ligros, the cutting fine, the bean is signifying there was a decree that the family will have to be separated. Don't be upset. It had to happen. There's no ways around it. Don't be sad. Don't be angry at the brothers. Now, why the wine? And it says old wine, because technically old wine should be better. But I'm telling you already, Egypt is not a country for wine. So why is Yosef sending old wine to his father? Yosef is telling his father, I didn't buy this wine this morning. I didn't go to the wine store and looked for a Chardonnay. I bought this wine bottle 22 years ago, because I knew that one day we're going to say L'chaim, and we're going to have a toast for these 22 years that I had to go down. It was for a benefit. All this period was already predestined, but not only predestined, if it's for a very good reason. So I knew that one day we will have to make a toast, and we will drink and laugh and look back and say, it was all worth it. Yosef is telling Yaakov, his father, Hashem does not send us problems, He sends us opportunities. Now take that and make a bumper sticker out of it. I'll say it again. God does not send us problems, He sends us opportunities. And that's the message that Yosef relays to his father. Don't be upset. Don't be angry. I was supposed to come here. The family was supposed to be separated. It was all Hashem's plan. It's all good. On that, there's a chidush, an amazing chidush by the Gaon Chida. And he says, what's the numerical value of the words yain, yashan? Make a quick calculation. Blah, 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 430. There was already a prophecy that we're going to be there for 430 years from the decree till the time we leave. Yosef is telling Yaakov didn't want to go down Mitzrayim, I told you. Yosef is telling him, don't be so sad, it's good. Calm down. The Yain Yashan, 430 years, from the day of the decree till 430 years after it, we're going to have to be in Mitzrayim. Come, you have no way around it. You're going to have to come to Mitzrayim. The full, the bean, what's the numerical value of the bean, of full? 116. 116 was how long was the exile, right? I told you the calculation, the 210 and the 86. So it wasn't 430 years, rather 116 years. I made you before the calculation, right? With the 210 and 86 years of the actual suffering. And the numerical value of full, that's 116. So Yosef is already telling Yaakov, it was all for a purpose. There's no point of being upset. And more than that, you have to come down to Mitzrayim, no way around it. So what is really the message that the Torah is telling me here, and what can I take from that to my life to apply it in my situations? So there's a story that I heard a long time ago, and I'm not going to give names and exact locations, but I'll tell you the story. Maybe some of you heard about it. The story took place in France a few decades ago, and there was a very rich Jewish individual that one day he gets a letter from the IRS that tells him that he's not being honest or whatever, and they fine him to pay immediately nothing less than 800 million francs. He goes to one of his friends who was a member of the Jewish community, and he's like, 800 million francs? I need a miracle. Go to your rabbis. So the man goes to the rabbi and he tells him, listen, can you, we need some miracle, maybe start going to some big rabbis, getting blessings. And so the rabbi tells him something along the line. What do you think? The rabbis are like an ATM. You put in, something comes out. I mean, that doesn't work like that. Your dear friend might be a Jew. He's not really an observant Jew. He's not a member of the community. What do you think? Now you have a problem, then suddenly you're running to the rabbis and you need a miracle and you need blessings. To make a long story short, it wasn't a simple situation to get out of. So the rabbi said, listen, I'll tell you what. Usually if you want to apply and to ask for a blessing, you have to do something. So I have a deal for you. I have some institutes of Torah, and we have a lot of financial difficulties. If your friend is willing to support these institutes of Torah, then that will kind of be a good way to put on the table, I will support the institutes of the Torah, just get this decree off me. So he says, listen, I don't mind giving a one-time donation, but you're talking about supporting now the institute, that's a lot of money every month. He says, okay, well, also pay the government 800 million francs. Okay, so they kind of cut a deal, and somehow He says, okay, I will support, but after I see that the decree was removed, somehow, a few weeks pass, he gets a letter, we made a calculation, a wrong calculation, it's not 800 million, it's 400 million. Ooh, that's a big change, 50% went down. So the rabbi tells him, no, you see, something already changed, okay, start coughing up money to pay for the institute. He says, no, I'm a businessman. I will pay what the deal said. The deal is like that if the decree is removed, then I'll start supporting the institute. So the rabbi's like, listen, stop bothering me with your nonsense now. And he leaves. Somehow, he gets a letter after a while. We are sorry for all the trouble we caused you. We apologize for the inconvenience. Not only that we were wrong in the calculation, that you don't even owe the 400 million, you actually overpaid through the years. We owe you 100 million francs. And needless to say that the story ends that for years and years, and I think probably up until today, this individual supports a very large amount of Torah institutes in this place, and so forth. The story comes to tell you something very deep. In life, there's going to have to be some type of a burden. Life is not a picnic. Hashem did not create this world to enjoy it. Hashem did not create a world for you to vacate and live on the beach all day long. Hashem created a world that you're going to have to deal with problems. So in life, there's going to be problems. The word in Hebrew is shi'abud, but if you translate the word shi'abud is hard work or labor or slavery. In Hebrew, it's more accurate to say shi'abud, that I'm bound to something. I'm obligated to do something. Something is a big burden. But the bottom line is that in life, there's going to always have to be a burden. That's how it is. If you want to not accept it, you have a problem. There's always going to be burdens in your life. There's always going to be something that bothers you, some bothersome issue. You might have breaks in between. But life is designed by God that it should be full of burdens and full of problems. But you can choose what the burden will be. You choose. You can choose this burden or you can choose that burden. As somebody once said, I can't quote the entire conversation, but there was an issue between a husband and wife that fight all the time. So I didn't have an answer for them. People think I have answers. I don't have always answers. So I said, listen, you're bound to fight. You're going to fight. So at least fight on good things. If it's decreed for you to fight and have shlom bayit issues, then at least fight on good things. There's a Mishnah that says, if a person accepts on himself the yoke on the Torah, כל המקבל על עצמו עול תורה, פורק ממנו עול דרך ארץ. If you accept on yourself the yoke on Torah, then the yoke of worldly things will be removed from you. So technically, you can choose where the burden is going to be. You can deal with worldly burdens. How am I going to make money to pay my rent? How am I going to deal with this business deal? How am I going to deal with my kid? How am I going to deal with my wife? Or you can choose to take on yourself the burden of Torah and be bothered with waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go and pray. And to be bothered of 2 hours of Torah, what Rabbi Levi said or Yeshua said. You choose what are you bothered with. You can be burdened with banks and mortgage and finance, or you can be burdened with the disagreement in the Talmud that you're sitting and trying to break your head on this sugya, on this question. You choose. There was one individual once that they had a shlom bayit issues. They had marital problems. And when I asked the husband, what's the problem? He says, well, my wife volunteers to so many different organizations, she's never home. You should be happy that she volunteers. Why are you giving her a problem with that? Be happy that she volunteers. That's why you have to fight. So at least you're fighting on good things. You have to fight. So from that we take that what was happening in Mitzrayim In Mitzrayim, what reduced everything is that they accepted on themselves all Torah, the yoke of Torah. They sat and learned Torah. They said, okay, we're supposed to be slaves. Let's be slaves to the Torah. We're supposed to work hard. So let's work hard in the Torah. You know how hard it is to learn 8 hours a day? People say, oh, look at these freeloaders, these people who learn in yeshiva, in kollel for 8 hours. Let's see you learn for 8 hours in kollel. I give a half an hour class, everybody's already snoring and sleeping. Yeah, I want to see you learning 10 hours a day Torah, 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. You know how hard it is to keep your head focused and to understand? I'm not telling you reading Tehillim, I'm talking about learning Torah. So in Mitzrayim, that's what they did. They took on themselves the yoke of Torah. Let's wake up early in the morning to pray nets at dawn. Instead of going at dawn on a train to go and work hard, I'll go work hard in the shul. It's not easy to pray every morning an hour and a half at 4 o'clock in the morning. Very few people can hold it steady. So that's what they said. Let's work hard in the Torah. Let's learn Torah all day long. Let's be busy in the Torah. That way it removes from us the burden of the worldly matters. There's a story once with a Chafetz Chaim that a rich person walked into his office and he told him, listen, I'm a very wealthy individual and I have a lot of businesses, but in the last few years, since I was giving a lot of charity, I decided to make it more efficient and I made a whole organization where I'm sitting there and we're not only giving money, we're actually giving produce and food and we're doing this and that, a lot of charity work. But the last few months, I find myself all day long in the organization, the charity organization. I don't work. I barely work. And all day long, I'm busy and burdened with carrying the food or taking the food or buying the produce or doing this and helping here and helping there. So he tells the Chafetz Chaim, what should I do? Should I be bothered running the non-for-profit, helping thousands of people? Or should I put that aside and go and make money? Because if I go and make money, I'll make more money. I'll have more money to give to charity. So the Chafetz Chaim pulls out a book of Tehillim, opens Tehillim chapter 23, and he quotes a verse. Ach tov v'chesed yirfuni kol yemei chayai. You know this verse, right? Chapter 23, one of the most read chapters of Tehillim. The last verse of this chapter, may only goodness and kindness pursue me all my life. Ach tov v'chesed yirfuni kol yemei chayai. Why does David HaMelech says yirdefuni? Yirdefuni means to run after me, to chase me, to haunt me, to pursue me. That's not the right word to say. Kindness and goodness should pursue me. You should have written something, they should find me. Because the word yirdefu, that's a very negative word. If you translate it, like I told you, will chase after you, pursue you, haunt you. David HaMelech says in life, something will hunt you. Something will pursue and run after you all day long. So let it be goodness and kindness. So the Chafetz Chaim tells this rich person, let the kindness and goodness run after you all day. Be bothered by the non-for-profit. Don't worry about the money right now. Obviously you're making money. Let the goodness and kindness and all the good work that you do, that should be bothering you. As David HaMelech says, shechesed yirdof otcha. Let the kindness pursue you and haunt you and chase you. And on that is said by our great sages, I don't know if you notice, that the only creature in the world that works hard for their living is of course the humans. Only humans work hard for their living. And the Midrash gives an example. I never saw deer drying figs in the field to eat them. The deer just eats what he finds. And the Midrash says, I never saw a lion that is like a schlepper, like a mover, carries things. You see a lion or a dog or a cat, they're standing in line to the community service to get a meal. They eat what they find. And they don't need to cook it, dry it, ferment it. They just eat it with the peel, with everything. We're the only ones who need to work really hard for our food. And if you're going back a few hundred years, okay, you know what it is to hunt the animal and then to skin it and slaughter it and cook. I mean, all this for a little piece of meat. Or if you want to eat something healthy, you have to work on the land and sow and plow. And now we have to work hard for the money to go and buy the food. So we're the only creatures really that work hard for our food. All the rest of the creatures, you just get it. And why is that? Because when I'm bothered with how I'm going to find my food or my livelihood, then you know what's the result? I look for God. If you would have envelopes of money at your doorstep every day, you wouldn't be running to pray so fast. You wouldn't be looking for different ways. How can I get a bracha for parnasa, a blessing in my parnasa? Right? If you would get every day transfers into your bank. Now when you don't have that, suddenly you go to pray, you buy the opening of the ark, I need to get a blessing in the deal, in the business deal, bless me here, give me beracha. 90% of what people ask me for blessings is parnasa, for the livelihood. So if I want to conclude this powerful message, is that the nation of Israel went down to Mitzrayim, they knew that they're going to be slaves. They knew that Yaakov was relocating to Mitzrayim, knowing he's about to bring the nation into slavery. The years of his life were the best, because when he went down to Mitzrayim, what did they do in Mitzrayim? They established yeshivot, right? Before they did the relocations, Yehuda goes down to Mitzrayim and he opens yeshivot. The whole time in Mitzrayim, they were busy with learning, studying Torah, praying. Since they were occupied with Torah, they didn't feel any other burden coming from any other direction. And they took this entire approach, and the whole time in Mitzrayim, they were like, instead of being slaves, let's cash it in to being slaves to the master of the universe. If you're already going to be a slave, then be a slave to God. Wake up early in the morning to pray. Learn 4 or 5 hours a day. I don't know many men that learn so much. And I'm not saying in chas v'shalom to hurt anybody's feelings. Not so easy to learn. And some don't have the time, but I can't say nobody has the time. If you're young, you're not married, fine. But very few people actually take 3 or 4 hours a day to learn Torah. And I'm talking about men that already have family, they have to work. I'm not talking about an 18-year-old boy that has nothing else to do. But most people, even if they're observant, they're not really slaves to Hashem. They're slaves to their mortgage and to their rent and to their car payments and for everything else but Hashem. The trick, what they did in Mitzrayim is that they're like, let's just be slaves to Hashem. We take the decree and what did you say before? Sweeten it or soften it? It's not even sweetening or softening. It's just moving it from here to here. Instead of me being a slave to the bank and to my boss, I'll be a slave to God. Can I go wrong with that? I can't go wrong with being a slave to God. I don't know exactly in years, but for many, many years, I became observant. Then I was in yeshiva for a very long time. Then, Baruch Hashem, we started having kids. So we opened up a business. And the business that I opened up, I was a photographer, and I did events, weddings and events. And it was such a good business that I would work 3-4 nights a month, and the rest of the month I was free. So for 7 years I learned in yeshiva and made a very good living. Worked once a week, twice a month, and learned in yeshiva. 7 years I was able to learn in yeshiva and support my family in a very honorable way and made a lot of money. I didn't even look to the business. I went to yeshiva every day, come home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then open my phone. Nobody was able to reach me. And I would work very little. Why? I was like, I'm a slave to God. Food comes to the table. The parnasa, I barely worked. And I was blessed with great livelihood. And 7 years, I was learning Torah from morning to night. Okay, a little bit less. I helped my wife. We had kids. After that, I started my outreach, started traveling around the world to lecture and to give classes. And for many, many years, and everything cost money, by the way, because everything I did for free, and everything cost money. We printed millions and millions of CDs and traveling everywhere, but everything was done for free. How was that possible? I had a business. That's it. I had a business. The business was producing money, and I covered. My business was supporting my own non-for-profit. There was never a donate button on my website. All the lectures were free. Everything was free. Booklets, CDs. I had a business, and the business was supporting the organization. Pretty good deal. Which was good. It didn't bother me that going to fundraise for an organization. But at some point, my mind was also in the business. At some point, my rabbi told me, you have to stop with business and be 100% dedicated to your outreach. And I was like, well, how is that possible? A, the business is what's funding the organization. B, it's what's supporting me. I already had then 5 kids. What am I just going to leave everything in a way and be dedicated to just what I do? He's like, yeah, because you're not doing enough. Instead of giving 2 classes a day, then there has to be 5 classes a day. You have to travel, you have to give lectures, your followers that are growing. And I said, I don't think that physically it can be done. He's like, don't worry, Hashem has problems. Hashem has any type of issue making things work. So it took about 2 years of transformation, and slowly we got rid of anything that had to do with business, and we came to a point that I was 100% working for Hashem. And do you think there was a problem? Hashem has problems writing checks. And I always would joke. People tell me, what do you do for a living? I said, I work for God. Best boss but ever. Paycheck comes on time, never misses a paycheck. I get all the benefits. Now, I'm not saying that I was swimming in money, but everything got taken care of. Completely. One time we went, I'll tell you a quick story and we can conclude. One time we went on a Shabbaton. I was invited to be the main speaker on a weekend in some community. They hosted us in a gorgeous hotel, wining and dining all day long. My wife came, all my kids came. And for 3 days straight, my mouth didn't close. Not because there was a lot of food. At 10 o'clock, talk to the men. 11 o'clock, talk to the women. 12 o'clock, talk to the kids. 4 o'clock, talk to the teenagers. They used every second of the day. I didn't enjoy all the food and the facilities, and 3 days I didn't stop talking. Okay, come the end of the event, we go home. My wife tells me, she was a little bit shy to ask, but she brought it out, and she's like, how much did they pay you? I said, I didn't ask for money. She's like, what? What do you mean you didn't ask for money? They invited you to be the main speaker of the event. They didn't pay you anything? I said, no. She's like, are you out of your mind? I mean, public speakers get a lot of money. A weekend like this, and any normal speaker will charge $5,000 to $10,000. I mean, you have to pay rent, you have to support the kids. What do you mean you didn't take money? I don't know, I didn't take money. Okay. About 8 months passed from that event. We lived at the time in Los Angeles. Came the summer. My wife tells me the kids have to go to summer camps. I said, I don't know which kids you're talking about, but my kids won't be going to summer camps, because to pay for a kid in summer camp in Los Angeles, you need a lot of money. She's like, I don't care where you get the money from. My kids are not going to be sitting all day long in the summer at home. You find money, and we're sending the kids to summer camps. Okay, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but fine. So we found a summer camp. I look at the prices. I'm like, is that for lifetime or a week? Like, okay. So I said, okay, I'll apply. And I saw like an option that you can apply for like a scholarship or a discount. Okay, I put my name. A few days later, somebody calls me. Rabbi Anava, yeah. It's Rabbi so-and-so. Okay. I'm calling from the camp. Okay. And he's like, how many kids do you want to send for the camp? I said, I have 4 kids to send. How long? Well, about 6 weeks, whatever we can do. And I make already the calculation. We're talking here about probably $20,000+. 4 kids, 6 weeks, each kid. So he tells me, do you remember me? And I'm like, listen, I meet a lot of people. I'm sorry, I don't really remember. He's like, 8 months ago, you came to our community for a Shabbaton, a weekend that we did, and you really changed the entire community. After that, every day, all the men came every day to pray in the morning. We established classes. We koshered 8 kitchens. You turned the whole community upside down. And I'm like, okay, it's good to know. So he tells me, you don't have to pay for the camp. Just pay for the t-shirts, the uniform, and the bus transportation in the morning. Your kids can come for 6 weeks for free. So I will go back to my wife and I tell her, you wanted then me to charge them a few $1,000s, right? I got now 6 weeks for 4 kids to go to camps with no charge. We just have to pay for the uniform and for the bus, the shuttle, whatever it was, a few $100s for the whole time. And I told her, you see what it is when you work for God? God pays all your bills. Everything is being covered and paid. It's not that the money came to me and I had to take it out. I mean, things get solved. You choose where the burden will go. You choose if the burden is going to be pursuing your livelihood, money, finding your other half, solving situations. The burden is going to have to be there. But you choose where you're going to put the burden. In any situation that you're going to look, you're going to have to search for God. You can't find your other half. Where do you go? You go to God. Start praying all day long, right? You're fasting, you're praying, 40 days here, 40 days there. Chas v'shalom, you get bad news about your health. Suddenly, you pray all day long. And I don't have to give more examples. Doesn't matter what's going to happen, you're going to have to look for God. Hashem is going to turn the situation around that you're going to have to look up and say, I need help. So what's the solution? Look for God in the good things.